Okay, so I'm going to give, again, the short versions of the resumes. You know, we do print up these nice brochures, and you've got a lot of background history in there. But what I want to do is just say a couple words about each commissioner together, and then we're going to have Ajit speak first, and then Mike O'Reilly. And the reason I'm going to have him speak first is the first thing it says in this bio, that he's the senior Republican commissioner on the FCC. And sometimes I get my protocol wrong, but that seems like that's probably the way to do it. So the thing I'm not going to talk about particular positions they've taken or whatever. They may do that, which I just said I think are generally ones that are certainly consistent with our principles here at the Free State Foundation. But the thing I'll just say about Commissioner Pai, and you could discern this if you read closely his bio, but he has held important positions in all three branches of our government, aside from the FCC, which I call the fourth branch myself. He's served at DOJ, an executive branch agency, on the Hill in senior positions in Congress. And he was a law clerk for a federal judge. That's not such a senior position, but it's an important position nevertheless. So he's served in all three branches of government, and you get, obviously, some important perspectives when you do that. Now, with regard to Commissioner O'Reilly, I think the thing that I would say, again, please look at his bio, but when you do, the thing that you will find about Commissioner O'Reilly is he didn't serve in all three branches of government, unless he left off some things. But what he did do is serve in very important positions on the Hill, I would say increasingly important positions throughout his career. There aren't too many people in Washington, or really, I assume throughout the country, that have served in as many senior staff positions as Commissioner O'Reilly. So that's certainly experience that is important that he brings to bear. So with that, I'm going to ask Commissioner Pai to come up first, just followed by Commissioner O'Reilly, and I thank them for being here. Right.
Well, thank you as always, Randy, for that very kind introduction. And you actually touched on something that I thought I would address just to get it out of the way. There's been a lot of press chatter about this, speculation. And I just want to make clear that I am not in the running to replace Judge Judy on the highest court of the land, as pleasing as that would be. I also have to say, I'm looking at this crowd, a very impressive, frankly intimidating group. I'm almost tempted to just persuade you that this is a mannequin challenge and slip out unnoticed. But I'll stay here to give the remarks, and you will probably notice as I give them that I've got chills being here, and it's not so much because I'm not excited about Free State, which I am, but it's more because I'm laboring under a pretty bad cold. So if I start coughing up a lung on those of you around here, I hope you'll indulge me. It is truly an honor to be here this afternoon at the 10th anniversary of the Free State Foundation. It's frankly hard to believe that a decade already has passed. And to put that in perspective, to give you an analogy that you would expect from someone like me, the #1 song on the Billboard chart for 2006 was Bad Day by Daniel Powter. And serving in the minority at the Federal Communications Commission for the last few years, there have been many times when the song's lyrics have resonated, have spoken to me. Because you had a bad day, you're taking one down, you sing a sad song just to turn it around. Amen, Mr. Powter. But of course, there have been many parts of this job that I have loved, and one of them has been the opportunity to work with Randy and the entire team at the Free State Foundation. All of us, I think, should respect the organization that Randy has built with his passion and his sweat equity. Free State is dedicated to promoting serious discussion about important public policy issues, particularly those involving the communications industry. And in a town where the debates often generate far more heat than light, Free State is known for its respectful dialogue and a focus on substance rather than personality. I must say, though, that I am troubled by one serious gap in Free State's mission. According to its website, the foundation's purpose is, and I quote, to promote understanding of free market, limited government, and rule of law principles at the federal level and in Maryland. Now, Randy, as someone who lives in Arlington, I just have to ask, what is your objection to bringing that understanding to Virginia? But in all seriousness, Free State is defined by a principled worldview. Randy has outlined some of those principles earlier today, and I wholeheartedly endorse that mission. It's during my 4.5 years at the FCC that I've had the privilege of serving, I've tried my best to play a small part in advancing those principles. On issue after issue at the FCC, the Free State Foundation has spoken out forcefully and eloquently on behalf of limited government, the rule of law, and robust economic analysis. It's been a key voice fighting against the FCC's regulatory overreach in areas such as net neutrality, broadband privacy, business data services, municipal broadband, and set-top boxes. Now, unfortunately, the FCC lately has been providing the Free State scholars with plenty of material to criticize. But I'm optimistic that last month's election will prove to be an inflection point, and that during the Trump administration, we will shift from playing defense at the FCC to going on offense. Indeed, I believe the new year will bring the best opportunity in the Free State Foundation's existence for it to advance public policy that reflects our shared principles. For example, Free State's Mike Corney has written, when analyzing the cost-effectiveness of a regulation, the first questions that should be asked are, does the regulation address a market failure or systemic problem? If it does, how does it correct the perceived market failure? And do the benefits of the regulatory solution outweigh the costs of imposing new regulatory requirements? Now, Mike's questions came in the context of discussing the Commission's Title II order, but I think they should apply much more broadly. Indeed, proof of market failure should guide the Commission's consideration of any additional regulation. And it goes without saying that the FCC should adopt no regulation unless it has made a decision that the benefits of doing so would outweigh the costs. Now, the Title II order, of course, failed to respect these principles. There was no evidence of systemic failure in the marketplace. And as I said at the time, one could read the entire document without finding anything more than a hypothesized harms. Or, in other words, public utility regulation was a solution that wouldn't work in search of a problem that didn't exist. On top of that, the Title II order itself failed to include any basic cost-benefit analysis. And don't take my word for it. In a recent Free State Foundation publication, Tim Brennan, the FCC's chief economist at the time the Title II order was adopted, said that a fair amount of the economics in the order was wrong, unsupported, or irrelevant. Now, on the day that the Title II order was adopted, I said that I don't know whether this plan will be vacated by a court, reversed by Congress, or overturned by a future commission. But I do believe that its days are numbered. Today, I'm more confident than ever that that prediction will come true. And I'm hopeful that beginning next year, our general regulatory approach will be a more sober one that is guided by evidence, sound economic analysis, and a good dose of humility. I'm also optimistic the FCC will once again respect the limits that Congress has placed on our authority. We can't simply enact whatever we think might be good public policy. We also have to make sure that we have the power to do so. But the Commission hasn't always done a good job of that of late. In one rulemaking proceeding, for instance, the DC Circuit has stayed the Commission not one, not two, not three, but 4 times in the last 3.5 years. I've never heard of this before happening to any agency, certainly not our own. And it's notable that every time Commissioner O'Reilly and I warned our colleagues that the FCC was exceeding its legal authority, we were rebuffed. The Commission barreled ahead anyway with a party line vote. Another example is the FCC's order attempting to preempt municipal broadband laws in North Carolina and Tennessee. In 2014, the Free State Foundation explained to the Commission why the FCC lacked the authority to preempt state regulation of municipal broadband projects. The legal analysis conducted by Randy and by Seth Cooper was clear and persuasive. But the FCC's leadership was more interested in making a political statement than respecting the rule of law. And so it went ahead and tried to preempt those state laws on a party line vote. The proof is in the pudding. Predictably, the Sixth Circuit rejected the Commission's action as unlawful. And going forward, I hope the Commission will do a much better job of respecting the rule of law and the legal constraints imposed upon us by our elected officials. If we have a good idea that we don't have the power to implement, our job should be to go to Congress to seek their guidance and, if necessary, their authorization before we take that step. The FCC is a creature of Congress, and it strains our legitimacy when we act in ways that stray beyond the four corners of the statute. It's also, frankly, just a waste of time and effort. For when a court invalidates a commission order, as it did in the municipal broadband case, the end result is accomplishing simply nothing other than wasting the time of the staff. Now, in the months to come, we also need to remove outdated and unnecessary regulations. As anyone who's had the misfortune of slogging through the Code of Federal Regulations can tell you, the regulatory underbrush at the FCC is thick. And so to me, we need to fire up the proverbial weed whacker and start removing those rules that are holding back investment, innovation, and job creation. Free State and others have already identified many of the rules that should go. And one means for the FCC to do this is biennial review, which we kicked off in early November. Under Section 11, Congress specifically directed the FCC to repeal unnecessary regulations, and we should follow that command. Another area where the Free State Foundation has led the way is process reform. And here, too, I think we're going to be able to make substantial progress in the coming year. There are many different ideas that are floating out there, but this afternoon, I want to focus briefly on one theme that I think links all of them. And it also links the advocacy that Free State has done with that of Commissioner O'Reilly and I. And that is that it is time to bring more openness and transparency to the FCC. Each commissioner, of course, is appointed by the President and confirmed by the United States Senate. And each commissioner brings his or her own talents and perspective to the job. And therefore, it follows, it seems to me, that each commissioner should be treated with respect and given a chance to contribute to the FCC's work. And that means that none should be kept in the dark about what is happening at the agency. We also need to let the American people have more information about the agency's operations. From publicly releasing the text of documents that we vote on at public meetings, to creating an online FCC dashboard that measures various performance metrics, we can better enable the public to know what and how we are doing. Now, this is important because right now, the FCC provides information selectively only to favored insiders. To give you one example, if you are in the good graces of the FCC's leadership, you can receive detailed information about the Commission's set-top box proposal. But if you aren't, you're left in the dark. To quote Victor Serta, one independent network executive, it's like negotiating with a mime. I know how he feels. This isn't fair. It isn't how the regulatory process should work. It tilts the playing field in favor of well-connected lobbyists and against the American public. And it must change. Now, before concluding, I'd like to thank all of the staff and the academic advisors who have contributed to giving the Free State Foundation such a powerful voice over the last decade. It's been a pleasure to read their work, to meet with them in my office and at conferences, and just to get to know them during my time at the Commission. Now, it certainly isn't enough time for me to mention everybody by name, but I'd be remiss if I didn't specifically thank three of Free State's most prolific authors, Seth Cooper, Gus Hurwitz, and Daniel Lyons. And of course, I must offer a special thanks to Free State's own Randy May. Randy, as you can tell, has poured his heart and soul into this organization. And he's remained dedicated to the task despite undergoing some pretty serious personal challenges that he mentioned earlier. His perseverance, his passion, and his good cheer in the face of hardship, I think, is an example to all of us. I have no doubt that Randy will continue to do so, and on the occasion of the Free State's 10th anniversary, I look forward to seeing what the organization will achieve in the next decade. Thanks for all of your attention, and I look forward to hearing from my friend and colleague, Commissioner O'Reilly, as well as our distinguished counterpart at the Copyright Office, Karen Temple-Leggett. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for your attention.
Well, I should say and start and say it's a true honor to be here. Yesterday I was in New Hampshire, and if you haven't noticed the weather, there's 3 inches of snow, and 15 degrees colder. But let me extend my congratulations to Randy and offer my sincere thanks for inviting me here be part of the festivities for Free State Foundation's 10th anniversary. The foundation holds a special place in my heart. As a newly minted commissioner, it's one of the first speaking opportunities that I accepted was at Free State Foundation event. And it seems miraculously, I've not worn out my welcome despite having made numerous return opportunities. Under Randy's deft leadership, the Free State Foundation has established itself as a leading champion of free market principles and policies that respect property rights and the rule of law. It has also been a platform hosting numerous events like this to explore thought-provoking policy issues with some of the best legal minds. Right from the beginning, the foundation has made invaluable contributions to nearly every major policy debate in communications world. And Randy's energy, passion, and prolific writing when it comes to communications and internet policy are truly contagious. Like many of you, I wholeheartedly welcome the opportunities that 2017 will bring. The American people have entrusted the government under new leadership with a weighty responsibility, and I look forward to working with everyone here to live up to their expectations by helping to craft a new course and tenor in communications policy. Examining closely the track record of this commission and the current state of play, I can't help but feel that this opportunity has arrived not a moment too soon. The last few years have been marked by a comprehensive effort to exert full control over every detail of anything even arguably within the agency's grasp, while also expanding our reach into every nook and cranny of vast internet economy. Many at the Commission seem to believe that the innovation in the marketplace is driven by disruptive regulation, not disruptive technology. Unfortunately, this urge to micromanage has been pervasive across a number of matters. So there's plenty of work for all of us to start the next year with arguably lots of room for improvement at every level. And the Free State Foundation will undoubtedly prove to be an exceptional partner and agitator in these efforts. From the perspective of the Commission, President-elect Trump and his team will soon be making decisions regarding leadership and direction going forward. It should be clear that I do not speak for the new administration to be. The President-elect and his team have earned that right, and with an amazing election outcome, to make appropriate decisions regarding the next chairperson, any commissioner openings, and the future direction of the commission. In all honesty, however, I'm excited and honored to play a part in the new commission, and to the extent it is helpful, I am humbly going to outline some very broad areas where I think the next commission could potentially focus some of its efforts. Number one, undo harmful policies. Foremost in many minds is the need to simply undo the more harmful policies adopted by the current commission. This audience needs no reminders of all the instances in which minority viewpoints were discarded without real consideration. Moreover, the policy direction chosen in these instances was wrong-headed, harmful to consumers and the industry, costly, and ultimately unworthy of continuation. For instance, we've already seen the impacts of reclassification of the broadband internet access service under Title II. Most recently, the Commission created a privacy scheme inconsistent with the FTC regime that has governed the internet to now and will continue to govern most other parts. And make no mistake, the list of harmful actions by this Commission is no means final yet. As we speak, the Commission is working on a number of last-minute projects in an attempt to move the goalpost a little more to the left, despite the clear instructions of Congress that we should immediately stop work on any controversial items. Most notably, the Wireless Bureau is still aggressively pursuing its year-long zero rating investigation against broadband providers and has demanded another round of responses from 2 providers by December 15th. While it is still unclear exactly where they're planning to go, the contentious nature of the letters that were just sent last week seems to hint at one last gift to be left under the tree of net neutrality activists. As my colleague Commissioner Pai and I have pointed out, any attempt to roll out new policy on this front can be easily reviewed and potentially reversed in a matter of weeks. But the underlying document could still be out there, waiting to be dug up like a capsule years from now and cited as some sort of precedent. Next year's commission should consider acting quickly to reverse any damaging policies put in place over the last 8 years and in the last few weeks of this administration. It should likewise close out any problematic notices and dockets. Number 2, clear regulatory underbrush. As Commissioner Pai properly noted, another priority worth attention is clearing away the existing regulatory underbrush that is choking businesses and diverting resources away from new and improved products, better service, and lower prices for consumers. In some instances, outdated rules are distorting entire marketplaces, preventing them from responding to modern realities and consumer demands. Such is the case of our media ownership rules. Relics of the nascent media world of bygone era, these rules can and should be thoughtfully updated. President-elect Trump has repeatedly noted the detrimental impact of the current stifling regulatory environment on all the American economy overall, and has promised fast relief. I particularly like his call for the elimination of 2 regulations for every new one created. Just imagine what Title 47 of the code would look like now had this policy been in place during the hyper-regulatory approach of the current commission. There are many avenues available for the commission to contribute to this effort. For instance, the commission's latest biennial review, which Commissioner Pai mentioned, was just initiated last month, seems like a perfect platform in certain circumstances. I hope everyone will aggressively participate in this proceeding so the commission has a broad and thoughtful list of rules to review. Meanwhile, I hope we work to complete some of the relatively easy initiatives that I've championed, such as eliminating the need for broadcasters to keep paper correspondence files, or allowing employers to meet EEO advertising requirements by placing employment opportunities where every job hunter in 2017 will be looking, on the internet. And certainly, we should move ahead to define and limit the black hole that is Team Telecom review process for communications companies courting foreign investors. Quite frankly, I pushed for many of these reviews and reforms, recognizing the limitations of being in the minority. I suspect there'll be greater opportunity to think about bigger reforms and deregulatory efforts done in a thoughtful way in the next commission. Number 3, develop and execute a strong pro-growth, pro-innovation agenda. The new commission should have ample opportunity to showcase its creativity and foresight by developing and executing a strong pro-growth, pro-innovation agenda firmly grounded in free market principles. Our president-elect is expected to move to address infrastructure needs, including broadband infrastructure. The commission may have a role to play in setting the conditions to encourage major new investments in this space. Top of the priority list should be the elimination of unnecessary obstacles that wireless infrastructure faces that are needed for the next nationwide generation of networks. I'd hope to be able to include this in any part of legislation moving in the Congress, and plan to share my specific thoughts with the legislators if asked. Moreover, through further reforms to universal service programs, we can continue our progress toward extending 21st century communications networks and all the benefits that they bring to the many parts of America that are still unserved. And we continue efforts to identify new commercial spectrum to pave the way for 5G, while optimizing bandwidth already in use by facilitating sharing in bands like 5.9. There should also be an opportunity to craft fully functional licenses for the 3.5 priority access license regime. Investors and innovators are unlikely to want to innovate, build, or expand on shaky ground, so the commission must assure that all players that our licenses will be vigorously enforced when they are threatened. Number 4, process reform and organization. Last but not least, I hope the next commission will take this opportunity to make substantial progress towards improving the efficiency of the commission and increasing the fairness and transparency in its processes. Though some seem to think that my prior process reform push was either tied to a particular item or else an attempt to weaken the power of the chair, I maintained throughout that time that these are common sense, good government proposals that I would still advocate for even if I was in the majority. Next year, I'd like to get the chance to make good on that effort. So there you have some of my initial thoughts on possible directions for the new commission. Addressing these areas would help produce greater benefits to consumers and a more accountable government. Personally, I can't wait to dig in and get started. with the help of interested parties, including Randy and Free State Foundation. So thank you so very much for your attention, and I look forward to working with all of you in the near future.
Thank you both, Commissioner Pai and Commissioner Riley, for the generous remarks and the kind words about the Free State Foundation. I appreciate that. But as importantly to me, thanks for really the look ahead, the peek into 2017, and the encouragement about the prospects for achieving some important reforms and talking about the way forward. We appreciate that, and we especially appreciate all of your service. Now, I just want to say a couple things, and then if the commissioners are willing, we've got time for just really, again, one or two questions. But number one, I forgot to mention this earlier, but hopefully some of you saw it. We've got the Twitter handle is hashtag SF10. It's on the front of your brochures, so hopefully you tweeters will engage or have already been engaged with that hashtag. The other thing I want to say is we've got some books on sale outside, 2 books. The first one that's out there is this one with a blue cover. It's Communications, Law, and Policy in the Digital Age. It was actually published in 2012. And so your first thought might be, Randy, you know, that's outdated. Why are you trying to foist one of those old books on us, even at the greatly reduced price of $12 per book? But I've got an answer for that. The answer is, you know, unfortunately, since 2012, the FCC has not really adopted many of the suggestions that we made in this book about the direction that we thought communications policy ought to take. So I think you might still find it useful, and I know I believe the commissioners at least had one years ago. Hopefully you'll pull it out, but there were some, I think, good essays in that. And then the other book that's out there is this more recent one, published last year. It's authored, this one is actually a collection of essays, mostly by our prestigious Board of Academic Advisors. First book. This book is authored by Seth Cooper and myself. It's called The Constitutional Foundations of Intellectual Property. And just in short, what we were aiming to do in that book was to explain why, in our view, our founders included the intellectual property clause in the Constitution. And there's a lot of philosophy in here, jurisprudence, biography, and some things that I think you might find interesting too, if you're interested at all in intellectual property. And I know we're shortly, in just a few moments, going to hear from the acting head of the Copyright Office, Karen Temple Claggett. And so we're looking forward to that. So now, that said, we're going to take a couple questions for the commissioners before we move on. I'm going to go to the press table first. Paul. Well, you go ahead. Oh, you wait for the, just identify yourself.
This is for both Paul Kirby with TR Daily. Commissioner Pai, are you trying to have talks with the Trump administration transition team on pop culture references they should use in the new year? But actually, have either one of you had any talks with Trump transition folks on being either acting chairman or permanent chairman in the new administration?
Before I answer that, Randy, I'm quite offended that you didn't offer us a luggage tag. I think we are another branch of government, just like Congress. I don't know.
That's still to come. But I will say this, before I do any event, I get this nice call from the ethics office over at the, the FCC, I think instigated by one of your offices, so you could bring your staff, and you can't imagine how difficult it is to just explain that I invited anyone in the world who would actually show up to attend this event today. And as you can see, there were a lot of people in the world that did show up to attend it.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'll resist my temptation to walk out on principle and answer Paul's question. I am not going to comment on any conversations I may or may not have had with the transition team or anyone else associated with the president-elect.
I think that's a fine place to be.
It really would have been exciting, wouldn't it, if Commissioner O'Reilly, after Commissioner Pai's answer, had said, "Well, I'll tell you this about my conversation," but no, that was a good try. That was a good try, anyway. Okay, do we have one more question? Maybe one or two more? Yes.
Kyle Daly, Bloomberg BNA. Commissioner O'Reilly mentioned the role that you guys might play in advancing broadband infrastructure. Could you get into a little more specifics with that? And I guess also, relatedly, would you anticipate changing the definition of broadband from the definition that was adopted somewhat recently?
Well, I think you have a great platform. I've spoken about infrastructure a number of times. I think there's probably a dozen different speeches I've given on the topic, and the need to address infrastructure matters. In terms of the definition, I think you can look back on my critique of the Commission's definition and concerns about its approach in the matter. So I don't want to go at length here, but I certainly didn't appreciate the last definition, because I think it was intended not to reflect what the marketplace is experiencing or what consumers are experiencing, but it was done for a particular regulatory purpose and to provide the Commission more authority. So I'm more leery on the abuse of that definition going forward.
Like Commissioner O'Reilly, I've talked a lot about broadband infrastructure, and if you are interested in how I'm thinking about these issues, or just simply in desperate need of a sleep aid, I would urge you to look at my September 13th speech in Cincinnati, where I outlined my proposal for gigabit opportunity zones, ways to incentivize the deployment of high-speed networks of all speeds, but all the way up to gigabit in low-income and rural areas and others. The second part of that plan, as you might know, was ensuring a greater mobile broadband. There are vast gaps in rural America that I think need to be filled, and I think the FCC does have some tools in the toolbox for filling them. And third, I outlined a number of different general regulatory barriers to infrastructure investment and deployment that I think the FCC and/or Congress could work together in solving. For example, using the Commission's Section 253 and 332 authority under the Communications Act and Section 6409 of the Spectrum Act to preempt state and local regulatory barriers. I also talked about us creating a model code so that states and localities that are interested in high-speed networks don't have to invent the wheel. They can simply pick up our guidelines and run with it. Streamlining the rules for federal deployment on federal lands, where it currently is something like 2x the time to approval for applications. And also dig once is another thing that I think should be embedded in the nation's transportation policy. I think every single person, regardless of affiliation, thinks that it's common sense. If you're going to dig up the road, why not lay the conduit that allows any company, big or small, incumbent or competitive, to have an opportunity to compete. And finally, taking a fresh look at our pole attachment rules. I think that would be something that would drive down one of the major cost elements, as I understand it, of broadband deployment. In addition to that, in Cincinnati, I also talked about some ideas about spurring greater entrepreneurship and innovation online. And while not necessarily related to the FCC's mission, nonetheless, I think it's important because obviously that online ecosystem is something that drives people to want broadband infrastructure. And if you sort of addressing the demand side, if you will, in addition to the supply side. So I talked about increasing access to capital, for example, for entrepreneurs who just simply don't have it right now. Tweaking the Startup Act, for example, to give an R&D credit or allowing the immediate expensing of certain things. And also under the Jobs Act, I think there's a lot that Congress could do, or the SEC or other federal agencies. So I think 2017 bodes really well for digital infrastructure, and I think it's highly consistent with what the President-elect has called for and what I think every American, especially those in rural America, have yearned for.
Okay, well, just in the interest of time, we're going to have to move on. But I want you to join me again in thanking Commissioner Pai and Commissioner O'Reilly. And I want to make sure that they do take a luggage tag with them. These, remember, I confess they're $3 at most, so take one.
Thanks so much, really appreciate it.
So I want to now call up the Honorable Acting Head of the Copyright Office, Karen Temple-Claggett, and my colleague, Seth Cooper. Seth is going to do the honors. And Daniel, why don't you go ahead and come up as well? Seth is going to do the honors in introducing Karen, and then following Karen, some brief remarks by Daniel Lyons, one of the members of our esteemed Board of Academic Advisors. So I just want to say, without stealing any thunder from Seth, that I'm really pleased both of you are here to help us celebrate this occasion. We thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for that introduction to the introduction, and I will provide the introduction to our Acting Register of Copyrights and the Director of the U.S. Copyright Office, Karen Temple-Claggett. And of course, as a public official, I believe that nothing she says today will actually be protected by federal copyright. But the role that she occupies as Director of the Copyright Office is critically important. She is responsible for all of the administrative functions and duties of the Copyright Office, administering the copyright law. That includes advising Congress on copyright matters, both nationally and internationally, informing federal agencies on copyright matters, and engaging with foreign governments and international organizations on international copyright issues. Prior to assuming her current post, she was, of course, Associate Register of Copyrights, and before that time was at the U.S. Department of Justice, where, among other things, she helped manage the Intellectual Property Task Force there. Her extensive bio is provided to you. It is very impressive. I suggest you read it over. She also has experience in private practice as well, and clerked for the Honorable Nathaniel Jones of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I very much am honored and look forward to hearing from Ms. Temple-Claggett. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to, of course, begin by thanking Randy and the Free State Foundation for this opportunity to address the Free State Foundation on its 10th anniversary celebration. Your perspective on the strong protection of IP rights has added to the diversity of voices over the last decade, which has seen monumental change in the copyright landscape. I applaud you for your thoughtful contributions and congratulate you on your 10th anniversary. As mentioned, I have been acting register for the Copyright Office for just about a month and a half. The experience has been, I would say, both challenging and rewarding, but it is temporary. So although it's kind of strange to say this at the National Press Club, I'm not here to actually make any news today. But instead, I want to use my time to look back at a couple of our recent studies that may have ongoing significance and are ripe for legislative process. Then I will turn to provide a brief snapshot of some of the office's current activities and priorities. There is simply no denying that copyright in the 21st century touches the lives of ordinary Americans like never before. It is no longer confined solely to major industry operatives. Instead, the internet has opened an online universe where everyone is a copyright owner, everyone is a copyright user. Given that reality, it is important that we ensure that copyright law and policy evolves in a way that adequately reflects the expectations of both creators and users of copyrighted works. A law that is outdated, inflexible, imbalanced, or confusing may ultimately become a law that is simply not followed. Both Congress and the Copyright Office are very aware of this reality and have acted to ensure that our copyright system can keep up with the technological advancements of a 21st century online world. As many of you may know, in 2013, the House Judiciary Committee launched a comprehensive review of our copyright laws to determine how they might need to be updated to better function and adapt to new technologies and business models. This review was precipitated in part by our previous Register, Maria Plante, when she did a speech, The Next Great Copyright Act, where she discussed how the world has changed since the last comprehensive update and outlined specific areas that Congress might want to consider. As part of that review process, the office has undertaken a number of studies of important copyright policy issues that have become a number of top priorities of the office. So the first study I'd like to mention is the Copyright Office's study into the complexities of the music marketplace, an area that I know Free State scholars have also frequently addressed and evaluated. Under the current system, music creators are often concerned that they will not be able to make a living. Music publishers and performance right organizations feel constrained by government control, and record labels and digital services find that the licensing process can be burdensome and inefficient. So after a year of public engagement, we released our report, Copyright and the Music Marketplace, in February of 2015. Of course, I will say there's probably no single constituent who embraced every aspect of our conclusions, but I will say that it's widely viewed as a tremendous contribution for a more rational system for the protection and consumption of musical works and sound recordings. The report proposed a series of changes that we believe would promote more efficient licensing practices, move closer toward parity among competing platforms, and secure fair compensation for artists and creators. For example, it proposes greater free market activity without abandoning the benefits of collective licensing where appropriate. It also recommended regulating musical works and sound recordings in a more consistent and market-oriented manner, and echoes our long-standing position that the United States should adopt a performance right for sound recordings played on terrestrial radio. In addition, we reiterated our previous assessment that pre-1972 sound recordings should be fully federalized and under the United States Copyright Act. Importantly, the report also encourages the development of an authoritative database for market participants to identify and license sound recordings and musical works with greater ease. Several bills have actually been introduced that adopt various aspects of the music industry report that we completed, and we hope that Congress will actually continue to look at some of these issues in the next Congress. Another top priority for the Copyright Office has been on the issue of small copyright claims. That is, copyright claims that have a small economic value, although they may be large to the individual creators who are affected. Our 2013 report in this regard documents the significant costs and challenges that individual creators have in protecting their rights against copyright infringement. So we recommended establishing an alternative voluntary system of adjudication to be housed within the Copyright Office. And earlier this summer, in fact, there was bipartisan legislation entitled the Copyright Alternative Small Claims Enforcement Act, the CASE Act, that was actually introduced in this Congress. This bill incorporates significant portions of our draft legislation, and again, it's something that we hope that Congress will continue to review in the next Congress. A number of our additional priorities are reflected in our ongoing studies. First, the Copyright Office is undertaking a study to evaluate the impact and effectiveness of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act's ISP safe harbor provisions contained in Section 512. We initiated that study. Not many people were interested. We received only 92,000 comments in response. And we had 2 roundtables, one in New York, one series in New York and in San Francisco. And just recently, we actually issued another notice requesting yet more comments, so we'll see what response we get, asking specific questions both with respect to how people perceive the previous comments that we had gotten, as well as actually asking for specific empirical research studies that may be able to help us as we evaluate and consider changes for the DMCA. So if you're interested, you can submit comments on February 6th if you have just specific factual comments to submit to us, and empirical research studies will be due on March 8th of 2017. We are also conducting a study on Section 1201, the anti-circumvention provisions which protect the integrity of technological protection measures used to secure copyrighted works in the online marketplace. These anti-circumvention provisions have played an important role in facilitating innovation and providing consumers with a wide range of delivery options. Still, as some have recognized, Section 1201 and the triennial rulemaking process that we actually handle in the Copyright Office does have some issues with respect to burden and resources that may need some updating and improvements. In recent years, the office has tried, within its own regulatory authority, to streamline resources and processes as much as possible, but this is also another issue or area that might benefit from congressional review and update. Finally, at the request of the leadership of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the office has initiated a study into the role that copyright law plays with respect to software-enabled consumer products. That is, how does copyright law affect consumers' use of products like refrigerators, toasters, cars, tractors, that years ago we never would have imagined may have implications for our copyright system. The senators requested that the office conduct a public process and submit a report in December, which we expect to do, so that will be coming out very shortly. But policy concerns are not really our only priorities. The office has repeatedly emphasized that a fundamental aspect of keeping the law updated and working effectively and efficiently in the digital age is ensuring that the Copyright Office itself is as modern and efficient as possible. So we've devoted considerable time to analyzing how to modernize our information technology systems to better meet the needs of creators, users, and the public. And we've published a series of reports dating back from December of 2014 all the way up through February of 2016 on these various related topics. Collectively, those reports call for technological transformation of the U.S. Copyright Office, operations and services, into a state-of-the-art office that is, quote, lean, nimble, results-driven, and future-focused. The new Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, has pledged her support for the modernization of objectives of the Copyright Office with respect to technology systems and infrastructure, copyright registration services, and the accuracy, timeliness, and searchability of public copyright records. And she has, in fact, directed the library's chief information officer to spearhead that effort. So as you can see, the vital work of the Copyright Office continues even as they are searching for a permanent register. And as I mentioned at the start of my presentation, and I have trusted that I conveyed throughout, even my current post as acting registrar is indeed rife with challenges, but those challenges are also really rich themselves with rewards. So we continue on with the very important work of the office, and we are looking forward to some of the priorities that I mentioned being handled by the next Congress. Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations to Randy and the Free State Foundation.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Having heard now from the politicians and the bureaucrats, I don't think the day would be complete without hearing from the professors to tell us what this all means. And so I'm going to next introduce Daniel Lyons. He is Associate Professor of Law at Boston College Law School. Among his areas of expertise and interest are, of course, telecommunications, energy, administrative law, and property. He's practiced law in private practice as well in Los Angeles, clerked for the Honorable Cynthia Holcomb Hull of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Daniel's also, of course, been a member of Free State Foundation's Distinguished Board of Academic Advisors and been an important contributor that way. He published a paper with us as recent as Monday. He's one of the contributors to this fine volume, Communications, Law, and Policy in the Digital Age. And we're really grateful for our Board of Academic Advisors and the contributions that they have made at the Free State Foundation. I think one of the most important contributions they've made lately is several of them collaborated to submit a series of white paper responses to the House Energy and Commerce Committee about communication reform and about a reformed Communications Act that's fit for the digital age. So certainly grateful for all that Daniel's contributed over the years and in the time ahead. So That being said, here is Daniel Lyons.
So thanks for having me today. Randy invited me to speak on behalf of the Free State Foundation's Board of Academic Advisors, which is a group of economists and law professors and other scholars who work with the foundation to promote the ideals of economic liberty and limited government and free markets. To be honest, I was a bit surprised that he asked me because I often feel humbled by the other names that are on the list. Names that include Richard Epstein, who's one of the most influential libertarian scholars in the past several decades, Christopher Yu, who led the academic fight against net neutrality. The list also included the late Fred Kahn, who was the Dean of Regulated Utilities Law, whose work really revolutionized the way we think about the administrative state. And I mention them because the Board of Academic Advisors, I think, highlights a different aspect of what it is that the Free State Foundation does. And most people here know Randy and Free State primarily because of their work with telecommunications policy, including these regular telecom conferences, events, comments filed in the FCC proceedings. And in that case, they've been very influential, right? My own unofficial survey of the FCC database in Westlaw suggested that the Free State Foundation has been cited in over 30 agency proceedings over the last decade, which frankly makes me a little bit jealous, Randy. But equally important to this day-to-day work in telecom policy is the contributions that the foundation has made to public policy discourse more generally, beyond the confines of FCC headquarters in Capitol Hill. By my count, the Free State Foundation itself has been cited in over 25 law review articles, and that's not counting the many, many citations that Randy has amassed for the work that he's put together in his individual capacity. Over the last decade, Randy and the other scholars associated with the foundation have really helped drive the national conversation on topics such as the unintended consequences of regulation, the value of an antitrust-based regulatory orientation, and the potential dangers that loom from the growing administrative state. And Randy's published some really groundbreaking work on First Amendment rights of network providers and the application of the Chevron doctrine to independent agencies, to the point that any serious scholar writing on these topics has to confront and wrestle with the ideas that the foundation continues to highlight. And as he noted before, he's also published 2 books with Carolina Academic Press. I also can't neglect the role that Free State Foundation has played in spotlighting and encouraging up-and-coming scholars with an orientation toward the principles of classical liberty. So I mentioned Christopher Yu, who is perhaps the most prominent scholar writing in opposition to government-mandated open internet rules. He noted that Randy and the Free State Foundation were among the first outsiders to recognize and promote his work in DC policy circles when he was a junior professor. And I, too, was plucked from obscurity in my second year when Randy asked me to summarize a recent article as part of the Free State Foundation's Perspective series. And he's relentlessly pursued me ever since to take my ideas out of the ivory tower, present them in ways that people can understand, first of all. Secondly, to have a real impact in DC policy circles. When I went up for tenure, I received tenure on the strength of the connections that my work had drawing connections between academia and practice. And I would not have had that impact without Randy's help and encouragement, giving me sort of countless opportunities to come and present my ideas here in DC. So I've really enjoyed being part of the Free State Foundation family over the past several years, and I use the word family intentionally. And to have played a small role in the tremendous impact that it's had shaping the public policy discourse over the last decade. I'm also looking forward to seeing where policy is going to go over the next decade. Well, where should it go, you may ask? Well, Randy's already plugged this book, right? Which, again, is on sale outside. In addition, as Seth highlighted, the foundation put together a number of white papers in response to Congress's efforts to revamp the Communications Act. Overall, I think it's important to revisit some of the regulatory excesses over the past years and to restructure the FCC to play a more modest but nonetheless vital role in managing the information economy. The agency is well situated to be a sector-specific antitrust regulator, one that amasses specialized knowledge about the internet ecosystem, but maintains a pro-innovation bent and intervenes primarily where market power is causing consumer harm. At the same time, as highlighted earlier, I think the agency can play a role in helping close the digital divide, not by replicating the questionable policies of the telephone era, but using market-based reforms that increase the purchasing power of low-income consumers. And procedurally, I'd like to echo the preceding speakers in my hope to see an agency that's more transparent and focuses more upon a return to the bipartisan consensus-building decision-making that has historically marked this agency, and from which we've unfortunately departed in recent years. The tech world is growing, and it's growing ever more diverse, and more of our daily activities move online. It's vital that we promote the ideals of economic liberty and free markets online just as we have offline. I commend the Free State Foundation for driving home that message over the past 10 years, and I wish it luck as it continues to do so over the next 10 years and beyond. Thanks.
Daniel, thanks very much. Those were very generous remarks, and not just to us at the Free State Foundation, but really directed as well to your colleagues on the Board of Academic Advisors. But you were much too modest about yourself, and I am glad that I plucked you out when I did pluck you out, but we appreciate everything that you do and your colleagues. And by the way, it is true that Christopher Yu, who many of you know, I did also pluck him out. He was at Vanderbilt University Law School at the time, and I read something that he wrote on net neutrality. I believe this was more than a decade ago. My former colleague at the Progress and Freedom Foundation, Tom Leonard, sitting here, and somehow he tried to convince me that Hughes article didn't make much sense, really, and I should leave him be. But despite that, I did call up Christopher Yu, and he came up, and we had an event over at the Mandarin Oriental. See, I can remember all this, and that's where he gave his first talk explaining why, in his view, network neutrality was not a good idea. But our academic advisors are really an integral part of what we do at the foundation, and we appreciate that. So we're going to close now. I want to thank all the speakers that have participated very much. But, you know, I said at the beginning, I didn't want to not say it, so you may have noticed I was reading some of that. But I said at that time, thanks to all of you for your support and for your friendship. And I just want to repeat that because that's really important, as important as anything else. And not only the support that you give, really, in various types of ways, but your friendship. So, you know, I said at the beginning, too, that we were dedicating this program to my daughter, Brooke, and I'm really, really sure that we did her proud today. So thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks.